A few days ago, someone made a comment about a watch saying, "It has a Japanese movement. I would never pay that amount for it." This sparked a good conversation topic about where the value of a watch comes from. And trying to define the value of a piece based on just one factor is a mistake that will prevent you from enjoying the hobby. Sadly, the watch collecting hobby is quite expensive. But thanks to that, we have the opportunity to appreciate different and intricate and complicated things. In this conversation, I'm going to use this watch as an example because I believe there are several factors to consider regarding a piece's value. This is the Venezianico Arsenale, specifically the Ultrablack version, which we will discuss further in a moment. Lately, people tend to view watches more as a monetary investment rather than as works of art. And generally, they make the mistake of thinking about how much they're going to gain or how much value this watch will retain if they buy it. But we will talk more about that later. Right now, let's focus on the different factors that give a piece its value. There will always be certain basic points that will increase the value of a watch, such as the materials used. Watches were originally made from brass and evolved to stainless steel cases. But we also have materials like titanium, and then moving higher up, precious metals like silver, gold, or platinum, among many others. Speaking of materials, there is also the aspect of finishing. Some brands base their entire identity on the finishes that can be applied to the watch. It's not the same to finish the watch industrially as it is to have a certified artisan for decades who can provide different finishes to the watches. In the case of this watch, we can see various finishes and facets around the entire case, which takes time and of course money. As I mentioned, it is not just about the material and a simple polish. The fact that someone took the time to facet and polish the bezel, to create these polished lines around the watch and then to brush the sides and the center of the case, all of that involves time, money, and above all, expertise, which comes at a cost. Next, we dive deeper into the watch, where we will find different types of movements. The basic ones are quartz and mechanical. Generally, mechanical and automatic movements are perceived to have a much higher value because it's simple. The mechanical watch promises much longer longevity, and if something breaks or fails, replacement parts can be obtained, while quartz watches are more complicated and come with a different mindset. But that's a topic for another day. But now comes the interesting part. Some people assign value to watches depending on where they come from. Swiss watches have undoubtedly done an excellent job of creating an identity that their watches are superior and are worth more. But believe me, we have excellent examples from Japan, Germany, and Italy in this case. Now let's focus on the movements. We have talked about this many times, but there are movements considered generic and those regarded as in-house manufactured. Generic movements have a lower perceived value because they are easy and cheap to obtain and are used by many brands. Whereas in-house movements are more exclusive, typically used only by the brand that developed them, and carry much higher sense of exclusivity. Then we go to the name factor. Because, like it or not, the name on the dial comes at a cost. If you think about any watch from a recognized brand, their names carry such a weight that they add an extra price just for being on the dial, regardless of whether the quality is the best or not. And this brings us back to a topic I've mentioned several times, where I believe that small or growing brands need to focus on providing more quality because their name doesn't carry much weight yet, while recognized brands can afford to not put as much effort into quality. But since their name carries weight, it still has value. And then we also get into different aspects like the dial of this Venezianico, which is painted with Musso black, one of the blackest paints in the world, absorbing almost 99% of the light it encounters. It's something unique that you won't find in any watch of its style, and certainly not at its price, which of course increases the watch's value. It features a Miyota movement from the 9000 series, which I believe is on par with many Swiss movements or even exceeds them. That has value. There was significant development and research behind this watch to make it extremely thin, which also adds to its cost and value. It's not just about getting a generic case and putting a movement in. There's research and development behind it. The case was developed with integrated locks with special entry rubber straps, and developing all of this comes at a cost, but also gives a different perceived value to the watch and to the brand. And lastly, as I mentioned, we have the dial in Muso Black, which, as I said, nobody else is using or making. It is complicated to define the value of a watch based on just one factor, such as the finishing or the movement or even the name or where it comes from. Beauty and value are much more complex because you can even delve into subjective themes, for example, sentimental value. We could talk about the Daytona that belonged to actor Paul Newman, which ended up selling for millions of dollars. Well, while a regular person might see the watch and say, it's not worth it. But it is worth it to the buyer for something completely subjective, as each person assigns the value to these things. Perhaps the finishing is worth more than the movement, or the name on the dial carries more weight than anything else. And that's what's great. You can enjoy your watch in a way that differs from how someone else might enjoy the same watch. If you're interested in learning more about this Venezianico, I'll leave the review I did on the purple one, which was spectacular. And I think this change to the black dial adds a deeper, sportier touch, and of course increases the watch's value. This watch will go on sale on November 26, so I'll leave the link below for you to check it out if you're interested.